Hey chickens, welcome to my housework ramble. Today I'm going to be cleaning my makeup brushes, basically. Exciting times for me in my life, cleaning my makeup brushes. I thought I'd take you along for the ride because I try not to do anything too noisy these days while I'm doing housework ramble, as I know a lot of people get distracted by the noise of the washing up and stuff like that. And I've tried various things with my Zoom recorder and other stuff to make the sound of the washing up fade into the background, but it's not that easily done, to be honest with you, because obviously it's right there in front of me, and I need the microphone to be right there in front of me, so it doesn't really work out that well. So I don't really want to disturb anyone that struggles big time to listen to me. I might do a little bit of washing up housework rambles every once in a while, just because I really do very much enjoy them, but I am hyper aware of the fact that some people who are on the autism spectrum or who have ADHD have explained to me that it's kind of difficult for them to follow along, and despite my best attempts I have not been able to make the audio what I consider to be much better. So I figured, although there's going to be a little bit of sound in this, it's not going to be that much. Basically I'm just going to be smothering my makeup brushes in conditioner and then laying them all out to dry. So I've got basically a big pencil case of the ones I need to do, and I don't normally let it go this long without doing them, to be honest, but sometimes life gets in the way. And I've got a glove on one hand, and I basically just wet the brush in water, and then I put the conditioner on, then I wet the brush off in other water, and then I put it out to dry on a tea towel. Just a heads up, this is how I clean my makeup brushes. I'm not going to change how I clean my makeup brushes. It works fine. I'm happy with my system, so please do not write in telling me that that is absolutely the wrong way and that I need to use this thing or that formula or I'm doing it wrong. My makeup brushes have lasted just fine for a very long time doing this exact thing, so I'm going to stick with this technique, guys. Housework rambles are a really good excuse to follow along with some housework yourself, guys. So if you're doing anything, if you're working on any kind of like repairs or washing up or cleaning your bathroom, whatever it might be, let us know down below what it is that you are working on while I do this housework ramble. It's a very good opportunity to get a lot of stuff done yourself while you listen to me harp on. So let's all encourage each other to do something productive, some sort of chore, maybe something we've been putting off even. Today I thought I might talk about silence, stillness and solitude, and I do have a little bit of a lisp sometimes, especially when I'm tired or a little bit drunk. I am not a little bit drunk right now, I am stone cold sober as a nun, but I am quite tired, so I'm gonna be a little bit spitty and lispy as I say silence, stillness and solitude. I call these the big three: silence, stillness and solitude. I've spoken to a great many of my clientele about the importance of these three things, and you know, I've really found a lot of benefit in factoring them in my own life as well. I have found over and over again that too much outside input, too much input from other people, too much noise, too much moving around, too much taking action and feeling like that's the only way to solve it is actually a little toxic for me when I'm going through difficulties. Oh, it smells so good with the conditioner on it. Lovely. Sorry, where was I? Yeah, I've found basically that one of the best things for me to do is to resort back to the big three when I feel like everything's going a bit haywire. Maybe I'm in the middle of a challenge and I'm not sure how to deal with it. Maybe I can't listen to myself. Maybe I'm unsure of what I actually think is the right thing to do. And so basically I like to go back to those big three, and I often find that that sets me right. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I've kind of discovered that and what that's all about for me, I suppose. And I would love to get your opinions about whether or not you tend to find that you need a little bit of silence, stillness and solitude when you find that you are unsure of what exactly you're thinking and feeling and how to deal with a challenge. Now obviously for me, I would say that I am slightly more extroverted than introverted, but essentially I would say that I am an ambivert, which I know that a lot of people don't like that word. I know that a lot of people are not keen on this newfangled term, but I think it's quite useful for people that actually are pretty much smack bang in the middle of the spectrum. Now, I'm not saying I'm 50-50 ambivert, but I am, you know, like 60-40. I'm definitely not the most extroverted person you're ever going to meet. I am good at being around people. That is absolutely without doubt. I'm definitely not backwards in coming forwards. I'm definitely not shy. I definitely enjoy people's company, but I'm likely to be one of those extroverts who does need to take herself off. And what I mean by that is I need to go away from time to time. I need to listen to my own thoughts, listen to my own breathing. I can't do, you know, a 2-day gathering, so like pre-drinks and then a party and then back to someone's house for an afters and then, you know, onwards from there without feeling like I've had some time on my own. I might take myself off to another room, just really sort of listen to myself and catch my breath. I'm usually somebody that offers to walk to the shops in the morning to get more booze if we've had a party, or, you know, if somebody needs something picking up from the shop, I normally will be the one to put my shades on and go out into the world and get it on my own, because I like to have that time on my own. I like to kind of catch up with myself, catch my breath, and listen to my own thoughts and feelings. So I know extroverts that are so much more extroverted than me. I do tend to find that I feel my batteries draining down from being around people too terribly much, you know. So I'm definitely not the most extroverted person, but I'm definitely more extrovert than introvert, I will say that. So for me, silence, stillness and solitude is something that makes sense, because I very often deny myself that because of the kind of lifestyle that I have. I am, like I said, more extroverted than introverted on average. So I will maybe tend to find that I have been a long time without, you know, just listening to my own thoughts and feelings at times. I will find that I've been around people for ages and maybe I feel like I need to just have some time to kind of get back to me. So I know a lot of people are not going to feel like that, because a lot of people are way more introverted, and so for them they might actually get a toxic amount of silence, stillness and solitude. It might actually be something that they need to have less of, but for me it's definitely something I find I need more of. The way that silence factors into the equation for me when I'm unsure of how to proceed or I'm dealing with challenges is twofold. First of all, when I say silence, I mean the meditative kind of silence, which may not necessarily be silence per se. So a lot of my meditations are just focusing on the breath, and, you know, I don't have any music on or anything like that, but there's going to be a lot of other types of meditation that I do. I like to do guided meditation. I like to do meditation using binaural beats and that kind of thing. I do like to use music with my meditations, so it might not necessarily be actually silent meditation, but I include all kinds of meditation in that particular aspect of it. So for me, it's definitely about meditation, whether that's silent or not, whether there's music or not, if that makes any sense. But the other part of the silence sort of piece is refraining from external input, and actually just listening to myself, listening to my guides, my deities, listening to my intuition, listening to my instinct, right? And I think that is the other part of it that's important. It's not just about allowing myself to meditate and be mindful and sit with myself and sit with the unfolding of my impressions and my emotions and make space for those things to come through. It's also about making sure that I'm not relying too heavily on conversation with people, whether that's professionals that I might employ to give me a reading or have a chat with me, or whether it's friends and loved ones. I tend to find that sometimes, because I'm a big talker, because I'm a big conversationalist, I may have this tendency to sort of immediately call upon others to have a conversation about what's going on, or have multiple conversations and maybe be interested in getting multiple points of view. And although there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I really enjoy doing that, I tend to find that that can come to a point where it's toxic. So the silence is both to do with meditation, mindfulness, and maybe even other forms of spiritual pursuit as well, like chanting or devotionals. I definitely think that it could include that, but it's also about making sure that I'm not too over the top with trying to get outside input, trying to get other people to tell me what they think or interact with me on a subject. I definitely don't think it's wrong to do that. Obviously, I wouldn't do the kind of work that I do if I thought it was wrong for people to entertain other people's insights or have a conversation. Obviously, I think dialogue is amazingly healing and amazingly illuminating, but too much of a good thing can be toxic, and I tend to find that sometimes I just hash something out way too much, and that's where employing silence during my challenges and during my issues becomes really important to me. Oh, there's so much powder in this brush. I've literally put it in the clean water 3 times now, and I'm still squeezing stuff out the end of it. This is my, you know, the kabuki brush, so it's just full of foundation and setting powder. Come on, my little beauty. Clean yourself. This one's kind of confusing as well because the end is actually pink, so it's like got an ombre effect on it, and it actually goes out into a pink end, so I can never really see that it's truly clean. I just have to do it by feel. Yes, you are finally good to go. One thing about me when it comes to the silence part of the program is that I live on my own, and I really enjoy living on my own. I'm not somebody that is in any hurry to cohabit on any level, whether it's platonic or romantic or whatever. I'm definitely not about shared living anymore. At this point in my life, I feel like I'm really privileged to be able to live on my own, and I feel like that's how I want it to stay. I can definitely envision myself sharing creative space with people, so sharing like a, you know, sort of some sort of warehouse space or something of that nature in the future where we can all meet together and do art or record things and stuff. But I feel like in terms of my home, it would take a lot for me to cohabit with somebody if I didn't financially need to. And I feel like I get a lot of my exposure to the silence that is so sorely needed sometimes because I live alone. So I feel like at a certain point, no matter how extroverted I've been or no matter how many people I've been around and talking to, I have to go back to mine and I'm alone. So I have to be alone, I have to live alone, I have to listen to myself. But even having said that, I think that it's very possible that people that live on their own can find a million different ways of, you know, drowning out their own thoughts and feelings and not listening to themselves. And I do try to make sure that I'm aware of that. I try to make sure that I'm aware that I still can have these ways of not just listening to my own thoughts and listening to my insights and making room for them. For example, when my ex-boyfriend and I broke up after 5 years together and 5 years cohabiting, when he moved out of the flat, it was really weird and difficult for me. And I became afraid of silence. I became afraid of my own thoughts. I became afraid of my own impressions and what was going on in my mind. And I became addicted to my phone, which I really didn't feel like was something that could happen to me. I just wouldn't have envisioned it, but I did become really addicted to my phone. I was constantly watching YouTube videos from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. Eventually I saw somebody about it, someone who occasionally does tarot for me and does spiritual counselling for me. And I said to her, you know, like, I'm addicted to my phone because I do not want to listen to what's going on in my own head. I'm not meditating. It's like I don't want to know what's there. And I know that I need to take a deep breath and just get off of this ridiculous train that I'm on of not wanting to listen to myself. But it's really hard. And she sort of talked me through it, and you know, it was hard to admit, actually, to be honest, which is silly because it's incredibly easy to become addicted to something that sucks you into it and gives you comfort and makes you feel like you're not on your own when you first have to live on your own. You know, it's easy to get stuck into that, and I would never judge anyone else for being stuck into that. So I don't know why I was so quick to judge myself, but that's what happens sometimes, right? So, and that's what happened with me. I was kind of ashamed of myself. But it took me quite some time before I got to the point where I could unhinge myself from my phone in the morning and just go back to using an alarm and feeling okay about that. So I definitely was afraid of living alone after all that time. And I suppose now I've gotten used to it a lot more and I enjoy it a lot and it feels right for me. I think maybe I want to preserve that because it has given me so much access to silence where I was kind of afraid of it before. Well, I was afraid of it during that period just after my ex-partner moved out. So I think I went through a lot of work to get to the point where I wasn't afraid anymore of just sitting in silence and letting my impressions come through, even though a lot of my impressions at the time were very sad, obviously, because my life had changed and my future was not going to be what he and I envisioned it to be anymore. So, you know, it was a tough time, and silence at that point had become a little unpleasant and undesirable for me. And so, yeah, I worked a lot to get to the point where silence was okay again, and I think it can be so healing. And, you know, I need it for those deeper insights and that more elusive, nuanced wisdom to come through as well. You know, the wisdom of your higher mind or your guides or your deity, or however you see it, whatever framework you use. Maybe you think of all of those things as being separate, maybe you don't. But I think that it's very hard sometimes to get clear messages in the middle of a crowd. And of course, it's hard to get clear messages when you're constantly asking other people what they think you ought to do or what their impression is of the situation. I used to live with this guy when I was doing shared living with my friends for quite a few years, who was deathly afraid of solitude. He was really afraid of being on his own. If he was on his own in his room, he'd constantly be making some kind of noise, bashing around, you know, sort of like screaming renditions of songs, thrashing his guitar while he was like, you know, had the amp turned way up, very, very inconsiderate of everybody else's feelings. And when he had people over, he was always just so loud, and everybody else was so loud. He was addicted to noise, you know, like unnecessary amounts of noise. He was addicted to the sound of his own very sort of amplified voice. He could never just sit in his room quietly and read. If he was alone in his room, he'd be having a loud phone call, or he'd be calling somebody over who shortly would be having a very loud conversation with him, or they'd be singing songs together and jamming out. Some of you might be thinking, well, this sounds really pleasant. He sounds like a really great guy to live with. But it became very obvious to me in the first 6 months I lived with him that he was just really scared of his own mind. He did not want to listen to the inside of his head, and other sort of information about him became apparent to me that made me realise why that was. And it was very disturbing for me in the end, after a full year of living with this guy, watching just exactly how unpleasant it was for him to have any access to his own brain box. He just did not want it. He was not interested in it. And that made it really difficult for me, because I could always hear him. And it wasn't so much the problem, like the problem wasn't so much that I could hear him. The problem was much more to do with the fact that I could feel his desperation and frustration at the fear he was experiencing. So I kind of could feel that he would rather listen to anything or say anything than listen to his own insights or say something to himself about the pain he was going through, you know. And I didn't need to be an empath to work that out, although I was becoming more empathic, let's say, as I was beginning to work more on the things I'm doing on the channel and the things I'm doing with my store. I definitely was getting there. But I would say I didn't even need empathic quality to feel that. I just needed to be empathetic enough to know and understand that this guy was like deathly afraid of his own internal narrative. And it was actually really destructive. He was a destructive and selfish human who needed to listen to himself, I think, quite sorely. When I say he was a destructive and selfish human, I mean, when I was living with him, he did a lot of destructive and selfish things, and he behaved in a destructive and selfish way. I'm not trying to say he as a complete individual was at no time anything other than selfish. That would be quite wrong. Everybody is very nuanced, and you know, I would rather talk about situations he did that display that selfishness, but that's a completely different video, and that's not necessarily the important thing. That's not why I brought him up in the conversation. So yeah, you know, he was steeped in selfishness and thoughtlessness, and he was very much about himself at that time, and other people, you know, really were caught in the crossfire, unfortunately, and were treated badly by him. So if anything, you know, he needed that that solitude, and he wouldn't let himself have it, or he needed that that solitude and that silence. Basically, they pretty much go hand in hand. Although of course you can be at a meditation retreat surrounded by 25 fucking people and be in silence. Essentially, for most people, solitude and silence go hand in hand, don't they? You are alone and you are being quiet and you are accessing your own thoughts and feelings, and that was like fucking kryptonite to him. He did not want to do that. He was not interested in that in any way, shape or form. And it definitely was yucky living with somebody like that. I'll tell you that for nothing. Have you ever been that person that is deathly afraid of what's going on inside your own head, what's going on inside your own being? Or have you lived with a person like that who's really afraid of it? What is that like? What was that like? Have you recognized like how toxic that can actually be? I would love to know. I can sometimes just hear myself talking to someone about something that's troubling me when I know I've kind of run out of things that it's useful to say. And what I actually need is to go back to the drawing board, stop expecting other people to listen and nod and agree or whatever, and actually just tune in with myself, tune in with my higher mind, tune in with spirit, tune in with my instinct. However you want to think of it, and I'd describe it in various ways depending on the situation. And I've had to pull away from people that I'm just sort of using as a crutch in that moment. And like I said, I definitely see the value of talking, and talking therapy and getting different points of view. No doubt whatsoever, I do see the value in that. But I've known when I'm using it as a crutch and when I'm actually trying to run away from the work that I need to do in silence and solitude. I think with that guy that I was friends with and that I lived with, he was afraid of what was in his own mind, but I think he was also afraid of being in situations where he wasn't being acknowledged, validated, congratulated, etc. He was always wanting to be around people who were telling him how brilliant he was, or who were very impressed by him, or very eager to admire him. And he selected romantic partners, I felt, you know, largely on that kind of basis. It never seemed to be a very equal pairing. It was always people that really admired him and his band and his position in the band he was in and stuff. And it always seemed that he wanted to be around people who were impressed by him in some way. And I think that sometimes it's not just about being the fear of being alone with your own thoughts. It's also about the fear of not being validated or propped up by someone else, and finding that you cannot validate or prop up yourself. You are somehow dissatisfied with yourself, or you're not convinced of your own brilliance, so you need to be around someone. You feel like you need to be around someone, or a great many people who are like, yeah, you're brilliant, you know, you're so fun to be around, you're so great, don't worry about those people, fuck those people, they're just jealous of you. You know, you're looking for people that are going to spin that kind of narrative, because you can't tell yourself that. It's like you don't have any dialogue with yourself, so you need somebody around you who is admiring you and telling you everything's going to be okay, or telling you that you're brilliant and other people are trash, or whatever narrative it is that he thought he needed. I think he was getting that from other people, and that's something that I wanted to take to myself and think about how I might be feeding into that kind of thing when I'm around other people. So if I'm really keen to be around others for long periods of time, or I don't want to be on my own, or I don't want to talk through something with myself on my own, I often ask myself, is that because you can't get behind your choices? Is that because you can't validate what it is you're really thinking and feeling? Do you feel like you need a friend or a loved one to tell you that you are in the right spot, or that you're doing the right thing? And if so, do you really need that? Is it really important that you get that from them? Or can you actually come to a point where you are allowing yourself to make decisions based on what you know is right, and you do not need to get that permission from someone else? Because it's disempowering. It's disempowering when I tell myself that someone else has got to sign off, and that I need to be satisfied with them telling me that I'm right about something. I should be able to do that for myself, tune in with my own intuition, know that I feel right about what I'm doing. So I don't just look at the behaviours of others, you know, like the guy I've just mentioned, and judge them and be like, oh, you know, wow, that guy can't sit with his own thoughts, or that person can't handle, you know, validating themselves. They have to get someone else to do it. I always take it back to self, and I know that's something I've talked about on and on the channel. But I take it back to self. I look at somebody's behaviour, and I might be annoyed with their behaviour. I might be pissed off. I might be angry. I might be judgy. I'm not a perfect human, but I will take it back to me. So I'll look at what they're doing, and I'll basically think to myself, whereabouts are you committing that same infraction against yourself? Whereabouts might you be trying to surround yourself with people who are spinning a nice narrative about you? Or I'll ask myself, whereabouts are you fearful of getting behind your own choices, rather than having other people, you know, cheerlead you and tell you that you're right about your choices? You know, do you need that at any point? Is that why you're fearful of solitude right now? I think for some people, the idea of being alone and just doing their own thing and having their own plan is scary as well, because they do convince themselves that other people have got the plans, other people have got the answers, other people should be in charge, and they don't really know what to do if other people aren't around. And that is just a lack of trust in your own brilliance and your own genius and your own innovation and your own inner child and your own inner artist and your inner mystic. It's like you think somebody else has all the goods, you think somebody else has all the gold, and that's just plainly and simply not true. And that's really about knowing that you can have a perfectly good time on your own, you can execute a perfectly fine plan on your own, and you can have that amazing time with yourself. You don't need to record it for anyone, you don't need anybody else to have been there to make that into a gorgeous use of time. And that is truly empowering and self-loving, is to know that you can go on a date with yourself. You don't need to share the sunset with anyone else. You don't need to put it on Instagram. It's for you, and you yourself have enjoyed it, and that's been enough. I know I've often said to you guys that one of the reasons that I don't record myself on walks anymore when I go out is because I live close to the sea now, so there's quite a lot of wind, whereas where I was before there wasn't all of that sound of the wind and stuff. So sometimes it does pick up on the camera, and I don't really like the feeling of walking along talking to you worried about whether or not it is coming out up on camera and whether or not I'm going to have to deal with it in editing and stuff. So that's one reason, but there is another reason as well, and that is that I tend to find that when I go on my walks, I just let myself think about things and figure things out and have a fresh take on things. And obviously the temptation is to kill two birds with one stone and go out for my walk, get my exercise, get my fresh air, but at the same time be producing some content for my channel, which is one of my great passions, one of my great loves. But I feel like it's really important for me to understand that when I do that, I am actually sacrificing some of the key time that I spend on my own. Some time that I can spend checking in with my own ideas, checking in with my own worries and thoughts and feelings, and letting myself just absorb those things and figure out what's going on for me. So that's another reason you don't see me out and about that much anymore in my videos, if at all. You will see some of that in the summer because I like to be out more in the summer, but a lot of the time when I'm doing my walking and stuff, I really am enjoying listening to myself in ways that I may not have done for the rest of the day or so far that day. So I do think it's important that we don't get so carried away with the opportunity to make content that we actually miss out on a really key opportune moment to listen to ourselves and just be with ourselves, you know. I seriously need to change this water and change my glove because it is looking murky as fuck. It is not tasty, guys. To me, if I'm ever scared of being on my own and being quiet enough to hear my own thoughts, I start with something really, really small, like 30 seconds. I know it sounds maybe ridiculous to some of you, and to others it might sound really relatable, but that experience that I mentioned earlier in this video where I talked about how my partner moved out, my partner of 5 years moved out, and I was living on my own for the first time in my adult life. That experience was so intense that I found that the only way to be gentle enough with myself to actually get the job done and stop being addicted to YouTube and stop being sort of stuck to my phone was to tell myself, okay, you know what, it's only 30 seconds without YouTube, it's only 30 seconds without noise, just try that and see how it goes. And I had to be really gentle with myself instead of shaming myself for, you know, being this person that's so into meditation and so spiritual but apparently can't stop watching YouTube videos from dawn till dusk. It wouldn't have been useful for me to shame myself, and I knew that. I had to be really gentle with myself and really say to myself, okay, this is tough and this is different, and it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to want to immerse yourself in YouTube and just lose yourself in the sound of other people's voices, but you need to process your pain and you need to listen to what's going on in your head, and also you need to make plans to be prolific and to get stuff done. And if you're just burying your head in YouTube video after YouTube video, Kellyanne, you are basically not going to be making those plans. You're not making those plans, you're not allowing yourself to go ahead and do things. You're just literally, really, I was just kind of numbing myself. I was numbing out, I was sat there numbing out, and I wasn't really doing a lot of things that I needed to be doing. I wasn't being very prolific, right? So I was very gentle with myself, and I would definitely suggest that you do that as well. If you find that you're in a position where you are scared of just listening to yourself, or turning off YouTube, or turning off whatever it is you're kind of addicted to, and you know, just sort of listening to yourself, then start with 30 seconds, start with a minute, you know, time yourself. And if you really couldn't handle it and it felt scary, or you came up with ideas that you don't think were healthy for you, then you can go back to listening to stuff. You don't have to stay in that silence, immersed in things that you feel might be unhealthy for you. So I'm definitely not suggesting everybody just goes cold turkey. And I didn't go cold turkey. I had to be like, okay, let me cut myself some slack here. This is obviously hard for a reason, or a bunch of reasons, and I need to be gentle with myself, because obviously my situation has changed and I'm scared of what's going through my mind, and that's okay. It's okay. It's understandable. So do not shame yourself if you find you're scared of stillness, or you're scared of silence and solitude. And what I mean by stillness actually is, I mean stopping doing what you're doing. So lots of people distract themselves, don't they, by being overly prolific. They get a massive list of things they've got to do, and they run away from their feelings and their problems and their processing needs by just like activating and going into kind of like busy bee mode, essentially. For some people it's totally the opposite way round, and you find that you are you know, stuck and you don't do anything, and you might even fall into a pattern of self-neglect or something like that, because you are so adverse to doing anything. But there are lots of people that fall into, they're making reams and reams of lists and being just a busy bee and pretending that everything's okay effectively by just doing and doing and doing and never stopping. And so stillness is also important, and I definitely have a tendency to run around like a headless chicken as well, and start lots of different projects and never really finish anything. When I find myself in a position where I've got a challenge or an issue or something that I'm running from, I definitely have that tendency to be prolific in a half-finished, disjointed kind of way. I don't know if anybody else gets that, where I've literally started 5 things and I've finished 0 of them, and my head hits the pillow at night time and I haven't really done anything of merit. I've started a bunch of things of merit, but I haven't really done, like I haven't really finished anything, you know. That definitely can happen to me without a doubt. And so the stillness is basically to avoid that. And also a lot of people that require stillness during times of challenge or pain or needing to process something, the reason they require stillness is because they're very busy helping everybody else and being everybody else's hero, picking up everybody else's pieces, doing everybody else's job. Does that sound like any of you? You know, I am naturally quite maternal, quite caring as a human. Certainly I don't want any children, but you can be maternal in a host of different ways. And believe me when I say that I am a caring soul, and I can definitely run away into other people's challenges and they can become my projects. That's not saying that all the care and all of the attention that I give and all of the focus that I give is running away, but my job is to know when I'm using it to run away, and when I'm being, you know, I'm almost heading up other people's dreams and being like, yeah, you want to do this, let's do this, you want to sort this out, let's sort this out. And it's almost too gung-ho, and eventually I have to be like, Kellyanne, you've got your own shit though. Remember that you're supposed to be addressing, honey bunny? Yeah, remember that? Remember that stuff? You're supposed to be addressing yourself. Yeah. So that can get a bit much. So stillness is also, for me, it's making sure that I'm not doing that. It's making sure that I'm not using other people's challenges as my own, so that I can avoid thinking about whatever it is I've got to handle. It's very, very easy to shoot your whole energetic load on somebody else's issue, and you can actually feel very, very rewarded temporarily from doing that, because you feel like the other person's so happy with you for that and so genuinely pleased that you've given all of this time and this energy. But if deep down you know you're avoiding something yourself and you need that energy for you, then that's where you need to start getting real with yourself. And it's no good resenting the other person, because the other person didn't ask you to abandon your own responsibilities. The other person just basically enjoyed what you were giving, and you were the one that set the precedent that you were going to give that. So You know, that's also something you've got to be really clear with yourself about, obviously. One of the things that's important for me about the big three, the silence, stillness and solitude, is that it's one way that I find that it's easier to look at my shadows in a non-judgmental way. So when I'm like busy, or I'm around loads of people, or my life is just very full, very chock-a-block, I tend to find that that's where the automatic negative thinking patterns come in, that I don't really check and I don't really witness them fully. So I will identify something within myself that I don't like, or that I'm unsure of, or that's made me uncomfortable. And instead of having the mental space and the mental capacity to look at that stuff and go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Why am I thinking like that? Or why am I being like that? If my life is too full and too loud, or it's got too many people saying too many things, I will fall into those negative thinking cycles where I'll be like, oh, I'm such a bitch, or I'm so critical, or I'm so whatever, just I'll be mean to myself about it, instead of seeing it as a really useful thing to examine. When I've had enough silence, stillness and solitude, when I've had enough spiritual practice, enough time alone, enough time just sitting, meditation, etc., when a shadow insight comes through, or I get a shadow coming to the surface of my consciousness, I will not shame myself and instantly go into berating myself or being angry with myself. Instead, I have the mental capacity to look at what I've just witnessed and say, I am glad I'm witnessing this in this moment. Let me make the space that I need to be able to actually understand what I've just seen in myself. I see that it was shadowy. I see that I'm not happy that I behaved like that or thought like that, but I've got the space to make sure that I do not tear myself down for it. So that's one thing, is that shadow work is far more effectively executed if I've had adequate time in silence, stillness and solitude. I feel like when I'm go, and I don't have enough time for me and my insights and my inner being, then that's when it becomes extremely easy, extraordinarily easy to witness something I don't like about myself and instantly go into, well, aren't you such a fucking bitch, or aren't you so ... you know. Over the course of time, as I've been doing this job and having conversations with people and stuff, I have had a lot of people ask me, how do you know the difference between being self-caring and taking time to relax versus laziness, like literally just being lazy, not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that is a very important thing, I think, to know the difference between, because there are lots and lots of people who tell themselves that they're just being kind to themselves, they're being nice to themselves, they're not pushing themselves too hard, but actually they could push themselves and nurture themselves to achieve so much more, but they're afraid. Right? And I think a lot of people know that they might be on that line. First of all, I think if you're asking somebody what the difference is between genuinely self-caring by relaxing and then actually being lazy, being resistant, being fearful, if you're asking that question, then you must know that you are sometimes teetering on that line yourself, I think, personally. You must at least have a suspicion or a worry about it, and I think that's worth listening to. But the other thing that I will say that I think is important also is that there is such a thing as intentional laziness, and there is definitely such a thing as toxic productivity. You can decide that you're going to do absolutely sweet fuck all for a whole weekend. You know, you can decide that that is how it's going to go, that that is what you want to do, that is, you know, the plan. And that plan is intentional, and that plan is for your mental health, your emotional well-being, your physical body, whatever, to recover and to, you know, be nurtured. So it doesn't matter if you're doing sweet fuck all for a whole weekend or whatever, because that is intentional, knowing that you need to recuperate. And you have to know that it's about recuperation. Be really honest with yourself about that. And if you feel like it's not really about recuperation, I actually could be doing something, then fucking do something. Seriously, just pull your socks up. Know that you've got to do what you've got to do, right? This is just so important, I think. And, you know, again, with sort of like toxic productivity, as it were, like I said, those people that make a list and run around like headless chickens, those people are in the midst of toxic productivity. They are doing something that is like distracting them from their actual journey of emotional well-being and mental exploration. They know that there's work they're supposed to be doing internally, but instead they are projecting, pushing that energy outwards all the time, so that they can avoid dealing with whatever it is that's going on inside of them that needs attention. So, you know, there's definitely such a thing as toxic productivity, and I'm willing to bet there's some people watching here who are the victims of toxic productivity, and there's probably loads of people who've watched a loved one, partner, family member, whatever, in the midst of toxic productivity, and you probably sat there being like, would you sit down, would you calm down, would you stop rearranging the pillows, stop doing everything, don't worry about the bloody utility room or the kitchen, just please, you need to be with yourself, you need to calm down. Like, those people are suffering from toxic productivity. You know it's toxic because you can feel it, right? You can actually feel that it's not the kind of productivity that feels good or is leading anywhere good. It's like anxiety based, and it's to run away sometimes. Like, I'm not saying that you can't get something great out of just doing something and expending physical energy. Of course you can. But where it becomes toxic is where you're running away from just sitting with the truth of what's happening in the unfolding moment. And I think that lots of people can actually identify when they're doing that, or when they're around someone who's doing that. And it can feel really uncomfortable. And again, it's that fear of what is going to happen if you just stop. The fear of what's going to happen if you just stop, let yourself feel what it is you need to feel, let yourself actually process what it is that you need to process. There is a fear of that, and I can understand fully the fear of that. I've been through it myself, so there's no judgment from me. I think that for me, it's become a lot easier to be in solitude and to listen to my thoughts and my impressions now that I'm at a place in my life where I know myself and I know the range of different characteristics and different strengths and flaws, you know. So I can list positive traits, but I can also list shadow characteristics that I have. I can definitely list things that I've worked on, things that I feel comfortable with, things that I've changed for the better, but I can also list the things that I'm currently working on that I'm not getting much traction with. I'm actually not being able to solve certain issues as quickly as I'd like, or I'm focusing on some shadow explorations, you know, to do with things inside me that need to be changed. I'm okay with that. I think that with my friend from my previous life in my 20s, who was very, very obviously afraid of being alone and being quiet, he was not able to do that. He was definitely able to list his abilities and his strengths in a very bombastic kind of egocentric way that was actually often unpleasant to behold, to be honest. And I started to realise that over the course of time. He could do that well enough, but he couldn't really genuinely, without any outside validation, without somebody propping him up and being like, yeah, absolutely, that's what you're like, you're amazing, whatever. He couldn't really honestly say, these are my strengths, this is what I'm proud of, this is what I've worked on, you know, this is what is good about me. Nor would he be able in any world to describe anything within himself that he would perceive as a flaw, and he wouldn't be able to handle being close to anyone else who would try and talk to him about his flaws or about what needed to change, because that's one of the reasons I got ousted from his life, I'm afraid, because you cannot live with somebody who's behaving that selfishly day in, day out without having some kind of a house intervention on him, and he was not into that. He was not about that at all, but we had to do it as his housemates, obviously, because it was just getting a bit ridiculous. But he very quickly ousted all of us. So I feel like once you're comfy with your flaws, once you're comfortable with the things about yourself that you are still working on or that you are struggling to change, and you are genuinely having a problem with it, but you feel like it's okay to acknowledge you're having a problem with it, then you're going to be a lot more comfortable being on your own, because you're not going to be trying to run away from those realizations about your shadow that you are keeping at bay by being around people, or by, you know, not being quiet enough for those insights to come in. Essentially what I'm saying is there's nothing I'm really deathly afraid of realizing about myself, even if I didn't previously realize it. I've got enough of a handle on my imperfect, complex, flawed character that it's not as though I'm chilled by the idea of having this awareness of myself come in that is going to be unpleasant for me, you know. If anything, I kind of relish learning those things about me that I still need to deal with or I still need to change, and that's okay, you know, that is enough for me. I also know that if shadow thoughts come along about myself, about my future, about someone else, I am aware of when the cut-off point needs to be. So I might sort of look at something that I've come to on my own in my explorations, and I might turn it over. I might look at it this way, I might look at it this way, I might be like, wow, I didn't see that, or I feel sad about that, or whatever. But I'm aware of when to stop thinking about it, when to stop turning it over. I'm not going to dwell on it, you know. I'm not going to go down the shadow sinkhole and spend the whole of the rest of the day obsessing and fixating. I know when to pull myself out, and I know what's useful and not useful for me. And I think that's another reason that people might fear being quiet and being alone and being still, because they don't know where that line is with themselves. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're never going to know. It basically means that they haven't done enough testing the water and enough inner work, enough, you know, work on the self to understand that they've got a handle on that. And there was a time when I didn't know that I had a handle on that. I didn't trust myself with my depression and everything else and what I've been through in the past with my eating disorder, my self-harm. I did not trust myself, plainly and simply, to know where the line is where you're supposed to drop something and stop ripping it up like a chew toy and stop curling up with it. I fully trust myself now, but it was a journey of trial and error, and it's a journey of trying things, and it's a journey of knowing that you're testing things out and you might not always be bang on the money. You might not always hit the nail on the head, and I didn't always. I had to go on a journey to eventually learn that I can let something go when it's ceased to be useful, especially when I'm on my own, when I'm listening to myself and I've got no one to bounce off of, because that can be the point where it can get hairy if you become obsessed. So I know when to drop it, I know when to stop, drop and roll, I know when to go out, when to eat something, when to change the subject, and I feel like most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I'm good with that, which makes it easier for me not to fear stillness, silence and solitude. I do think that a lot of people also struggle to be grateful for challenges that come up when they're on their own and they're thinking about stuff, or they're meditating, or no one's around basically and they're just with themselves, right? I've come to this point in my life where I can really be thankful for the challenging stuff that comes through. I experience it, it's not very nice, it might feel weird, I might cry, I might, you know, feel like, oh my god, I'm alone crying and this reminds me of times I've been alone crying and it's difficult and I want to stop it. But at the same time, I will stop and have a moment of gratitude to myself that this is coming up, because it is a learning process. It's something that I hadn't realized before, or I hadn't had the chance to focus on fully before, and I can see the merit in that, you know. And I think for a lot of people, the idea of something coming to them, an insight or a realization coming to them when they're on their own, and they cry or they are upset about it, to them that is like, no, worst nightmare, do not want that to happen, that's horrible, it's scary, I don't want to be alone with it, I don't want to sit with it. I think that it's hard for some people at certain points in their life, or some people with certain personalities, to look at that experience of being on their own and being sad or processing something and think, I'm happy this is happening. It's hard, yes, it is hard, but I'm grateful for this opportunity to process this, because I'm going to be stronger for it, I'm going to be more illuminated for it, I'm going to know myself more completely as a result of this, you know. I think that's something that I can do. And again, I'm not tooting my own horn, I'm not saying, oh, I've always been able to do it, I'm so clever, I'm so great. It took me a lot of trial and error, it took me a lot of not feeling capable of being grateful for that situation, and ringing someone up, or, you know, numbing out with YouTube or whatever and being like, no, I'm not fucking ready, I can't do this, no part of me wants this, no cell in my body wants this right now. There were a lot of times for me like that, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I think that there are definitely ways that you can access the big three that are safer and that are, you know, make more sense for where you are in your life. So if you've just come out of some sort of mental health issue or episode, or you've just had a massive breakup or something like that, you don't feel stable, you're having issues with food or whatever the case may be, you might feel like being alone for a 3-day silence retreat is not going to be the one. Turning my phone off and tuning out of life is not going to be healthy for me, and that's fine. That is absolutely fine. You can choose to just go on a walk through the park. You know, in the summer, you can see people around, you know people are around you. It's not like a complete solitude, and it's not a prolonged solitude, but it's a good start. I mean, remember what I said at the beginning. I was starting with 30 seconds or a minute, 30 seconds to a minute, and then 90 seconds literally of no YouTube. That's how addicted I was when my partner moved out. I really just didn't want to go there, guys. I didn't want to fucking go there. And this was not years and years and years ago. Like, I had the channel. We broke up in 2016, so it's not ages and ages ago that I had this experience. I'm telling you that there are absolutely times where you could have done a lot of work on yourself and a lot of spiritual work, but you can still come to the point where being on your own with whatever it is you're going through feels fucking awful, and you would rather do anything but do that. And you still have to come to this point where you're like, okay, I'm fearful, I understand why I'm fearful, but this is not where I want to drop anchor. And for that experience, for that sort of stage in your life, just a very small thing can be really useful. You know, even if you just want to sit with a friend and say, is it okay if we just have a minute of silence or a few minutes of meditation together? Or you want to go to a meditation group where you feel like it's safer and there's people around you. You know, there's different ways of doing it. I'm definitely not saying that everything is one way, and it's horses for courses. Basically, it's looking at your personal situation, knowing what's right for you, knowing what's actually going to be way too much for you, and definitely allowing yourself to avoid that. You can build up to more of the big three, I think. And so I suppose what I would do now is invite you guys to think about where you might need silence or stillness or solitude or all three in your life, and think about what you would use them for, what you need them for, why you might be running away from them. Are you where you need to be with silence, stillness and solitude? Is it something that you feel like you've worked out and you are on good terms with those things right now? Are you coming to a point where your previous ability to be in silence, stillness and solitude is actually being a little bit messed with because of the current circumstances you're going through? Let's have a discussion. I really enjoy reading the comments on these kinds of things. So this has been my housework ramble. I have done all... How many of my brushes are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 27 brushes counted in the Russian, darling. I'm feeling very, very pleased with myself. I'm going to set these all out on the bathroom floor now to dry on a towel overnight, and then in the morning I'll have lovely clean brushes. And I definitely should not let my brush situation get this out of hand again, because this is bloody ridiculous. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for coming with me on this housework ramble. And now I'm going to take my makeup off and go to Bedfordshire. Mwah. Blessed be, guys.